In 1931, Miguel Mike Uihlein moved to Washington, D.C. from Ohio at the age of 57, constructing an ice plant in the 1000 block of 3rd Street Northeast. A shrewd businessman in the ice industry, Uihlein, a Dutch native, built a small ice empire, from a horse and wagon operation to over 30 ice plants throughout Ohio. He also held 69 patents for devices in the ice industry. By the late 1930s, having established himself in the district, Uihlein partnered with other businessmen with the idea of creating an ice arena. Ice skating had taken off as a sport.
There was Riverside Stadium and the Chevy Chase Ice Palace, which were hugely popular around the 1939 to 1940 era. The ice hockey, skating had all become extremely popular in DC, and because he was sort of the consummate businessman, I think he saw an opportunity to increase his business and profits.
A 1939 Washington Post editorial touted, "Nothing in recent sports history has been more impressive than the alacrity and enthusiasm with which Washingtonians have taken to skates. A year ago, the city had no rink, and skaters could only pray, none too hopefully, for a good long freeze. Now there is both an indoor and outdoor rink, each evidently popular. Everything seems to augur well for a hockey team worthy to carry the brand new colors of the capital city." After his business partners backed out of the deal, Uihlein decided to finance the project on his own, borrowing money against his business. On March 11, 1940, construction began on the new $700,000 arena.
Rather than having to use columns for support, which you obviously don't want in an arena, you need a large clear space. It used this new novel technological system called the Zeiss-Diewodak system, which had been invented in Germany. And it was important because it used concrete, so there wasn't a lot of steel needed, which cut down on costs. And it would create this concrete shell roof. You could either have external or interior concrete ribs, which help support it. They built it using wood forms, so it was pretty easy for construction as well. Jacks would raise up the form, they'd pour the concrete, it would set, they'd drop the form back down, roll it along to the next section, lift it back up, and pour the next. So it was kind of a mixture of technology and economy, which I think was attractive to Uihlein.
Based on the design of the Hershey Arena, Uihlein's arena spanned 88 feet by 218 feet, making it one of the largest arenas in the eastern United States. On January 28, 1941, the arena opened with the Ice Capades to a packed crowd of 3,000 spectators. The last-minute construction leading up to the event, though, left for a dusty environment, as well as subpar ice surfaces for the skaters, causing them to struggle through the performance. Despite the rough start, the Ice Capades would be an arena staple for the next 30 years. Corresponding with the opening, the American Hockey League granted D.C. a franchise hockey team, which would make the newly completed Uihlein Arena its home.
Hockey was one of the major events, even though Riverside Stadium had a hockey team in a different league. But he still decided, we need more hockey. There's obviously a market for it.
Hoping to compete against Riverside Stadium's team for spectators, the team was initially named the Washington Uihleins, but would eventually settle on the Lions. Playing 2 seasons, the team disbanded during World War II. Later incarnations of the team would play in the Eastern Hockey League, winning back-to-back championships in 1954 and 55. Later, a new franchise would be renamed the Washington Presidents, eventually to be disbanded by 1960, ending the arena's reign of professional hockey. Uihlein also got into the business of basketball, since the ice could be easily covered and converted to a court. He acquired a Basketball Association of America franchise in 1946, naming it the Washington Capitals.
The Washington Capitals were put together mostly by a native of Brooklyn who came down to Washington for school named Red Auerbach, who is a famous Hall of Fame basketball general manager and coach. He was the coach and general manager here, and he put together a lot of his Navy friends to be on the first team, and they were very successful. They were one of the best teams in the league, and in their 3rd season, they made it to the Basketball Association Finals, and they played the Minneapolis Lakers of George Mikan. And had they not had a few of the injuries that they had, they might have even won that series.
Uline saw Red Auerbach when he was coaching the George Preston Marshall's basketball team. It was sort of like a traveling team they did. He was successful for a short period of time. He was only on one-year contracts. They would go to the finals, the playoffs. He would make shrewd acquisitions in the offseason. Lost in the finals once, lost in the conference finals once. And then eventually, when he resigned, they didn't want to pay him, so they let one of their players become a player coach, and Red Auerbach left and went on to other bigger and better success in the Boston Celtics.
In 1950, the year after Auerbach's resignation, the Washington Capitals merged into the NBA.
We all know about the story of Jackie Robinson and the integration of Major League Baseball in 1947. Professional basketball was a solely white league as well. And in 1950, the Washington Capitals and the New York Knicks, among others, drafted out of college some potential players who happened to be African American. But the first African American player to play in the NBA was a forward named Earl Lloyd, and played for the Washington Capitals on Halloween night, 1950.
The next year, Uline disbanded the team. The arena would only see basketball again in short spurts. Nearly a decade later, the Washington Tapers played a season in 1960. In 1969, the American Basketball Association team, the Washington Caps, played at the arena for a short-lived season before moving on to Richmond. With the more successful Baltimore Bullets, owned by Abe Pollin, looking to move into a new arena in the district, it would spell the end of professional basketball at Uline. From its beginning, Uline Arena played a national role in the battle for integration. At its opening, the arena was segregated, allowing blacks to only attend boxing events. It became the scene for boycotts and protests through the 1940s.
Uline's sort of public statements about this were that he let promoters decide, what was going to be the policy as far as if it was a segregated or integrated event, but he was generally the promoter, and it was generally segregated. He seems to have bought into the fear of having African-American male audience looking at white women. If they were performing in the Ice Capades, for example, he found that distasteful.
Just like anything else in the area, there was segregation. Blacks were not allowed to come in for basketball or hockey, but they were for boxing. At the time, Uline was following the motto of the rest of the city. There was policies and procedures set up that he was abiding by because he was a businessman. And so then eventually, as the time started to change in the city in the late 40s, he felt pressured from outside to desegregate.
Those boycotts and protests that took place in the late 40s, led by Fairfax NAACP founder E.B. Henderson, were successful in drawing negative publicity, as well as causing economic difficulties for the arena. In 1948, Uline abandoned his segregation policy, opening up arena events to all races.
In Washington, Joe Louis steps back inside the ropes to make his bow as a wrestler. Cowboy Rocky Lee is his opponent, a 23-stone hunk of man with a carefully nurtured reputation as a meanie. There's all the usual clawing and pawing, spiced with some authentic Louis action.
For 2 decades, Uline Arena played host to a wide range of entertainment. Dances, boxing, wrestling, rodeos, roller derby, and circuses graced the floor of that arena for Washingtonians.
The arena was at 3rd and M Street, and I remember it well. It was really the only public place like that in the entire area. And in addition to having basketball and hockey there, they had shows, but they also had, which a lot of people don't remember, they had public ice skating there as well. And it was where I learned how to ice skate.
I moved here in 1954. It was an integrated neighborhood. Most of my neighbors were white, and most of them that lived across the street were the people that worked here at the Coliseum. And most of the people that worked here I grew up with, some of the referees and the people that taught ice skating here. They had an ice skating ring. They also had the roller derby that used to come here. Wrestling was a big thing at one time here at the Washington Coliseum. They had a thing called the Afro Home Cooking Show. Every year they would have that, sponsored by a newspaper called the Afro. They had a thing called the Cotton Ball. And that's when blacks would get dressed up in their finest, and they would have like a big dance here. Harlem Globetrotters, Stevie Wonder, I think James Brown was here once. They had quite a few, people that were here.
He just wanted the stadium booked because that would obviously result in profit. So there were some very strange and incompatible uses. They did rodeos, they had Roy Rogers and Trigger, and there was evidently a number of problems with that performance because you've got cold ice under the clay that they threw down for the floor, so there was a lot of slipping around. And then something bizarre called midget car races, which they put in a track and would have car racing in an enclosed arena with little ventilation, also seemed to be an odd choice. But ultimately he wanted to keep the arena booked and make money.
In 1958, Miguel Uline died, leaving the majority of his estate, including the arena, to his daughters. After attempting to run operations, his daughter, Jean Paul Pratt, ended up selling the arena to businessman Harry Lynn for the price of $1 million. Lynn went to work with renovations, costing some $100,000 that included parking for 500 additional cars. The arena also received a new name to distance itself from past negative publicity. A new marquee featuring a miniature Washington monument was erected with the name Washington Coliseum. On February 11, 1964, a very snowy day for Washington, 4 boys from Liverpool, England made their way to town by train from New York City. After appearing on the famed Ed Sullivan Show, Paul, George, John, and Ringo stepped off a train at Union Station to much fanfare.
I was an 18-year-old professional photographer. When I heard the music, I said to myself, I wonder if I could go. I wonder if I could be a part of that. I wonder if I could get press credentials to cover it. So I went to a magazine that I freelanced for. They got me a little red badge that allowed me to be in with the press corps.
The most exciting thing is when the Beatles showed up, and that was a big thing. Kids came from all over. They camped out in the freezing cold. My neighbor that ran the shows and took care of everything in here, Mr. Miller and Mr. Dub, were real good friends of ours, the kids in the neighborhood. And he knew I wanted to come in here, so he said, okay, I'll let you in, but you got to stand over here in this corner beside this curtain, And I told him I wouldn't be long, But that's how I end up in the Coliseum.
Lynn was actually afraid that the concert wasn't going to sell out, so he added the Chiffons and Tommy Rowe as an opening act, and they were each going to sing 2 songs, and then the Beatles came on and did their 12. But again, you're having an event in a place that wasn't ever designed for that, so they just had to kind of erect a makeshift stage in the center of the arena, and then everybody sort of ringed around them, and then they had people sitting in the stands, obviously.
And then all of a sudden the Beatles came out through the crowd, like a boxer would come through the arena, and took the stage and broke right into Roll Over Beethoven.
Screaming wasn't the word. As soon as they opened the doors and said, the doors were open for the Beatles, they got to screaming and howling. But, it was an exciting day for, kids in that era. It's something that, that I would always remember and keep close to, dear to my heart, because it was exciting then, that somebody from another country here in the United States for the first time, and we got to see him before anybody else got to see him.
That concert was only 35 minutes long, as it turns out. And it didn't feel like that. It was so intense. The energy level was so high. I was just completely adrenalized for that whole period of time. Looking, right? And being pummeled with this incredible music, which I could hear being right next to the stage. It was louder than anything I'd ever heard, right? So you're dealing with that kind of assault at the same time. Yeah, it was intense.
Everything's alright. We will have some fun tonight. Have some fun. Yeah. Oh, we're gonna have some fun tonight. Have some fun tonight. Everything's alright. We will have some fun tonight. Have some fun. Yeah. Oh, we're gonna have some fun tonight. Have some fun tonight. Everything's alright. We will have some fun tonight. We will have some fun tonight.
For the next 20 years, there would be a slow decline for the arena. With changes in transportation and city demographics, Lynn would end up selling the venue to Publishers Company Incorporated in 1969. Just a year before, the H Street neighborhood, just a few blocks away from the Coliseum, saw violence and destruction during the riots of 1968. Competition in the district would increase further for the Coliseum with the opening of the Kennedy Center in 1971 and then the Capitol Center in 1973. With nearly 3 times the capacity, that Capitol Center would draw crowds away from the city and out into suburban Maryland.
So Abe Poland, after trying to find an arena in D.C. for his Baltimore Bullets team, which he was ready to move, built his own arena out in Landover, Maryland, known as the Capitol Center. And that is about the end of the Washington Coliseum's real life as an arena. This arena was very hard for people to get to. A lot of people had left the city, and so it wasn't as attractive for them to come in to the city to see shows. It was a small arena, and it was behind the times with the kind of technology that it had.
The Washington Coliseum would continue to host concerts and other events throughout the 70s and 80s. A sound that was authentically DC was growing in popularity in the city. Go-go music, a mixture of funk, R&B, and hip-hop, catered to shows in large dance halls, and the Washington Coliseum was perfect with its low rental fee and intercity location. The Coliseum would see a series of sales starting in 1986 with Tacoma Park Christian Faith Center buying the arena with big plans. After spending $17.5 million on renovations, they opened the Miracle Faith Center that included a convention space, a chapel, and radio and television studios. But maintenance fees proved to be too much for the church, and they sold the arena in 1996 to LG Industries. The new company would turn the once vibrant venue into a trash transfer station, and after battles with neighborhood advocates, the site was eventually shut down. In 2003, the company would apply for a demolition permit, and the DC Preservation League would step in and place the site on its most endangered places for 2003. In 2004, Douglas Development bought the property. In order to keep the building from being demolished, the DC Preservation League worked to get the building added to the DC Inventory of Historic Sites in 2006 and to the National Register of Historic Places in 2007. Future plans for the arena, which will be called the Coliseum, hope to bring 50,000 square feet of retail and 150,000 square feet of office space while still maintaining the historic facade of the building.
I think that the arena's role in DC history is not only as sort of one of the early, sports and cultural facilities in town, but also I think its role in integration is highly significant. It was, an example of a place where people protested and boycotted and were able to affect change.
It has such iconic value, and the history of what went on there. Again, the sporting events that were conducted there, the fact that we had shows there, which always will be highlighted, if you will, by the Beatles having performed there. So it would be just criminal to have to tear that building down, and I'm glad that it's being preserved and being preserved for a modern day purpose, but the building itself will still be there.
Uline Arena, Washington Coliseum is very important to DC's history. It is a location where a lot of great basketball players and basketball games were played. It is an example of the battle that took place to desegregate public accommodations and to racially integrate professional sports leagues. And then it is one of the few remaining examples of mid-century arena architecture that exists in the United States at this point.